welcome back Science 9 students. Today we're going to talk about energy resources, and more specifically we're going to talk about renewable and non-renewable energy resources. The opening slide here is crude oil is being pumped out of the ground. If you drive through the state of North Dakota, you'll see a lot of these in operation right now. Crude oil is an example of a non-renewable resource, but it can be refined into gasoline and other oil products. So let's talk about non-renewable energy resources. It's a non-renewable energy resource because it exists in limited quantities and once used cannot be replaced except over the course of millions of years. So some non-renewable energy resources would include oil, natural gas, coal, uranium, those sorts of things. And it does say over the course of millions of years because coal, for example, it is from a plant. However, it takes millions of years in order for it to be able to compress and get turned into the coal. So if you've ever taken a trip up to Lake of the Woods ice fishing, you'll notice how it's there's like this peat bog in between Red Lake and Lake of the Woods. That's going to be future coal if it gets compressed and gets refined the right way. So coal does come from plants. However, it takes millions of years for it to turn into coal. So once we use up our coal, it's going to take a long time for it to be replaced. Same thing with oil. You guys know that comes from fossils. Same scenario, it takes a long time in order to make it. So non-renewable energy resources sometimes can be called as fossil fuels. That's what we're used on a lot of our vehicles and how we heat our homes. A lot of our energy does come from non-renewable energy resources. So like it says here, oil, natural gas, and coal, they make up what is known as fossil fuels. So they were from remains of once living organisms, but they get turned into fossils. It takes a lot of time. Fossil fuels do account for the great majority of the world's energy use, mainly because they're cheap to get at. It's relatively inexpensive to burn them. We can get them. That's just the main thing with why we use fossil fuels. It's not evenly distributed throughout the world, so oftentimes wars and battles are started because maybe one country has more fossil fuels versus the other, because it's not evenly distributed. So that's non-renewable energy resources. The majority of today's lesson is going to be talking about renewable energy resources. So these are resources that can be replaced in a relatively short period of time, like within 100 years or so. So renewable energy resources would include hydroelectric, solar, geothermal, wind, biomass, and possibly in the future, some nuclear fusion. So let's look at these. Most renewable energy resources really originates from the sun, either directly or indirectly, and I'll explain that as we're talking about these different resources. The sun and the earth are constantly releasing large amounts of energy. So hydroelectric energy, this would be like flowing water. This would be like for instance in this picture, I'll go back, like the Hoover Dam or any sort of dam structure. Basically what it's doing is it's taking the potential, because water, when it's uphill, it has gravitational potential energy. It is moving downhill, so it has some of this kinetic energy because it's moving downhill. And then that kinetic energy, behind those dams, there's those turbines, and they're connected to electric generators, which gives us our electricity. But like those dams structures wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the sun, because the sun evaporates the water from the oceans and the lakes and the rivers. It goes up into the clouds and then it rains back down, and so that's actually what causes the water to flow, because all the rain hits the ground. It's got to go somewhere. Oftentimes it goes into the river systems, and that's what causes the water to flow. So even this is kind of directly from the sun. So here's a picture of the Hoover Dam structure. It's 221 meters tall and can generate 2 million kilowatts of power. It definitely kicks off quite a bit of energy. As you can see, this water's higher than down below here, so it has gravitational potential energy up here, and then as it's moving down, it's getting converted into kinetic energy. There's turbines throughout this thing, which are hooked up to those generators. It gives us a lot of power, and basically a lot of free power once it's been built up. The drawbacks of dams would be, well, at one point this was just a stream. Let's just say you had a house here at one point. Well, now you just lost your you lost your house. So when you make dams, it pulls the waters upstream, which you guys know. We live in the Brainerd Lakes area. We have a dam over there in Brainerd. It created the lump park, so it can have drawbacks. Also, it a lot of times can have a lot less water downstream too. So people downstream from the dam maybe aren't getting enough water for irrigating their crops if you're farming. So there is some drawbacks to building these dams, and the fact that it's costly to maintain it because it's got to be monitored all the time. You got to repair it if it gets any cracks or gets damaged. So it's renewable though. I mean, we're always going to have this water flowing through here. We're always going to have the sun. It's going to be evaporating. It's always going to rain. So it is a renewable energy resource, which is good for us. So that is the hydroelectric energy. So now we're going to talk about solar energy. So solar energy would be where the sunlight's being converted into usable energy known as solar energy. This would be like your solar panels. So we have two types of solar energy. We have passive solar energy and we have active solar energy. Active solar energy would be like your solar panels that's being used to convert the energy into electricity. Passive solar designs is just taking the sunlight and it's just heating a building without the machinery. So fun fact of the day, the Mall of America technically doesn't have any heating systems in it. What it has is a bunch of glass panels for the ceiling that allows the sunlight to come through during the day, and then actually heats up the building with everybody else's body heat in there. So the Mall of America does not have a heater. It doesn't need it. It uses a passive solar design. You guys maybe noticed that in the winter time, since we live in Minnesota. If you get in your vehicle on a bright sunny day, it might be 10 degrees, but you get inside the vehicle and maybe the vehicle is 50 or 60 degrees. It's pretty warm. So that's passive, where you're not using machinery. The active solar would be like your solar panels. So basically, yeah, so those are your solar panels. Let's kind of keep working here. Let's talk about geothermal energy. So that was solar energy, which is renewable. All of these resources are renewable. Let's talk about geothermal. This is taking advantage of, because you guys know that the center of the earth is just basically hot molten rock. So and we're just on a crust of the earth. If we tap down below the crust of the earth, there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of thermal energy that we can tap into, and there's loads of it. So it's basically a renewable energy resource for us. So regions near these active volcanoes, they can get a lot of electricity from that thermal energy, and it doesn't pollute. So this would be an example of our geothermal energy plant. What it would be is it'd be heating up, basically taking steam, getting it heated up, and then it would send through these things, and it just sits and spins the turbines, generating the electricity. And then here would be an example of your solar panels. You guys have seen those. Alright, so let's talk about some other renewable energy resources. One of the other ones would be biomass energy. So this is the chemical energy stored in living things. A while back in the early 2000s, there was this big, one of the big things was, ooh, we're going to be making gasoline from corn. And we're going to be making that and putting that in our vehicles. Well, good idea at the time, but we still need to eat corn. So if all of our corn was going into our vehicles, well, it's not going to, or being used to make, fuel for our vehicles, it's not going to leave a whole lot of corn for us to eat. So that was kind of a big craze. That's pretty, we use a little bit of it, but not a ton of it anymore. Some of the other things would be like a hydrogen fuel cell. This would be if you take electricity and you run it through water, it literally produces hydrogen and oxygen gas. The hydrogen is very explosive, so that would be a very good thing that we could use as hydrogen fuel cells. Let's see here, I'll skip through that. So let's talk about what can we do to help conserve these energy resources. Because we have a limited amount, we have to think about the planet. So, so energy resources can be conserved by conserving energy needs and increasing the efficiency of our energy use. There's a vocab word for us here. Finding the ways to use less energy or to use energy more efficiently is known as energy conservation. Making appliances, cars, and even light bulbs more efficient is one way to reduce our energy use. Let's see here. I have Ice Castle Fish House. My light bulbs used to be the 12-volt incandescent bulbs. However, that would drain the batteries really fast in the fish house. What I did a few years ago is I put the LED light bulbs in there, and it barely draws off the batteries anymore. I can make it a couple nights fishing without having to charge the batteries. So that's just one way that we could help reduce my energy usage. Appliances nowadays are very efficient. You can go and buy TVs. They all appliances have a star rating, like a 4-star or 5-star energy efficient. And if you look closely, it'll tell you your average bill that you should have for the year. So when you guys get older, you grow up, pay attention to that. You can save a ton of money by buying appliances that are energy efficient. They might be more expensive up front. However, over the lifetime of using it, because they use less energy, you're going to save money, and it's good for the environment. So that's kind of what it's saying here. Energy efficient purchases often cost more initially, but they can save a ton of money in costs over time. Another thing that we could do is just reduce the amount of travel that we're doing, or use mass transit systems like a rail car, you might see here in San Francisco, carpool to school, maybe take a bike if you can, those types of things. Mass transportation is another great way to reduce energy resources. So I'm going to leave these questions for you guys. You'll have an assignment on Schoology 15.3.